All right, today we're going to move into the next level of our animation projects. Up until this point, all the assignments that we've been doing have been dictated by me. I've said, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and put the drawing here, here's the timing, this is the way I should go, this is where you squish it, this is where you stretch it, etc., etc. I've been telling you everything to do, and basically all you've had to do is just copy what I do or follow along with it, and you got it. Now we're going to move into the realm where we're going to apply those principles that we've been dealing with. So if we just go through them in order, with the perpetual ball bounce, we're dealing with gravity, the idea of slowing in and slowing out, how gravity affects an object and causes it to speed up as it goes down and slow down as it reverses direction, and the loss of energy. Stretch and squash, so that when something impacts on something, it squishes down. When it reacts to that, it'll stretch back out again. Then we got into the overlapping action when we added a secondary ball onto it. We had the primary ball, which is the motivator, which is causing the action to take place, and then the secondary ball on top of it was reacting to what the first one was doing. And then we did another form of overlapping action where we added on the tail. Then we introduced the idea of descending energy, where we had the ball bouncing in from the side and it slows to a stop, and how energy gets reduced as it moves along. Then we added on the double ball, and again the overlapping action, adding on a tail, again just a different form of it. And then we started to move into the overlapping pendulum and the idea of the swing, and how we have slow in and overlap, and the reversal of the curve, where we had the S curve, C curve going up, and then it reverses, goes into an S curve, and then reverses back into a reverse C curve. Then we moved into the seaweed assignment, where again we're doing basically the same thing, but we're reversing the action where it's locked down here and it's moving back and forth this way, and then adding on the volumes to it. So this week what we're going to move into is the arm swing. So we're going to start to apply all these principles to the actions on a character's body. And this will ultimately build up to the point where we're actually doing a full body walk cycle. So we'll start off with the arm, then we'll move down to the legs, and then we'll put everything together into its final format in an actual walk cycle. So the basic principle that we're going to be dealing with here is essentially the pendulum swing, but we're going to apply it in a slightly different way, because obviously your arm, we're working with the arm, which starts off at the clavicle right here. Your center point on your neck is the center of your hinge point of your clavicle, which extends across here. So you guys should all know this from your life drawing classes, right? So you got your clavicle over here, then we go into your shoulder, the bicep part of your arm, then your forearm, and then down into your hand. So we have these different segments, 1, 2, 3, and 4, if we take this back part of your hand, and 5, the fingers. We're not going to segment the fingers into their individual joints. We'll just keep it very simple with a hinge right here. So we've got those 5 different points, or parts, that we're going to be dealing with. Now, the thing that we're not going to do on this assignment is we're not going to actually have the action of a walking character into it, because as you have a character walking, the idea behind when a character walks is that you've got your full stride, and you won't be able to see this on the video because it's only showing from my waist up, but your full stride is when your legs are fully apart this way, and your heel is down on the one side and your toe is down on the opposite side. That's your full stride. And then you've got what's called a mid stride, which is when you bring your knee across in the middle of the action. So the difference between those two positions is that when you're in your mid stride, when you're in this position here with the number 4, and you'll be able to see this on the video, my height is a certain height. But when I go into my full stride, basically I go like this, and my height will drop a certain amount, right? So this is my high point, low point. So when you walk, it's not really obvious when you walk that much, unless you've got sort of a goofy type of a walk. Most people, when they walk, they have just a subtle little bounce up and down like this, whereas some people will have something a little bit more pronounced like this, depending on how big your stride is and how much you cushion yourself when you put your foot down. You rarely ever see anybody walking like this, or they're bouncing up and down like that. So we're not going to do that up and down action. We're going to make it a little bit more simple by just locking this point onto our page. So this is the pivot point, similar to the pendulum swing where we had the fulcrum. We're going to lock this point down. But in reality, this point here would pivot not only this way, but it would also be moving up and down like this, right? So it would be pumping up and down. But in some cases, you might have a character who has a little bit of this action. So from your spine down here, the base of your spine on your hip, to your shoulder point up in the back of your neck, essentially your spine works like this. And what action is that from your assignments? It's a seaweed assignment, right? So we're going to have a seaweed action taking place when we get to the full body walk cycle, where your character will not only be going like this, but they'll also be going like this, right? And then we're going to add in this as well. Okay, so you've got both up and down, forward, and pivot. So like I said before, we're going to make this simple by just going, putting a pin right here, and our character's arms are just going to swing back and forth like this. Now, when we do this swinging action, we have to approach it in a segmented way. So when we did the pendulum swing, we looked at it as the overall line, and we basically, when I told you to do it, I said essentially on the first part, when we're swinging across, you've got your curve that's going like this. So it's a C curve going across here. It rises up to its high point, and then we begin the reversal where this part here goes down and this part here still goes up like this, and then it reverses and snaps and then swings back down this way, and then we get the reversal on the opposite side where it does the opposite, coming down. So in this case here, we don't have a rubber hose arm that is going to, have lots of curves in it. It's basically, it's all straight lines all the way through. Straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line across here. So we have to approach it in a more segmented way. So we're going to do it in layers. We're not going to do it all at the same time. We're going to do just the clavicle first. So we're going to start off with the center point here, and essentially we're just going to swing the shoulder from here to the shoulder back and forth. Now we can modify this action if you want to. You can have it just going in a straight line back and forth this way, or you can create a figure 8 action where it's going like this, where we've got a dip in the middle and it reaches its low point down here, and then it loops and comes up and then reaches the middle point, crisscrosses over and reaches the low point here. So we could do this type of an action if you want. If you wanted to, you could do this type of an action. Okay? Or you can do down and then snap back up like this. So you could have this type of an action. It just depends on how you want to make your character move. So now we're into this realm, and we did a little bit of this when we did the double ball bounce and the descending energy, where I said, have it move whichever way you want. This time, I'm going to allow you, within the parameters of the 16 drawing cycle, because it will be a 16 drawing cycle, you can do anything you want with this action. But the thing that you have to remember is that whatever you do here will be reflected in the rest of your arm. Right? So if you do a figure 8 action here like this, your arm is going to have to follow that figure 8 action throughout. Okay? When it reaches its low point down here, the elbow is going to have to reach its low point as well. Right? So we're going to have to consider that type of stuff. So what you need to do, as we're talking about this right now, is I want you to begin to think about how your arm is going to move. Right? We can have a standard arm move, and again, I'm going to leave this largely up to you. I'll show you one variation, and I think online there's another variation where the arm swing goes up and over like this a little bit more. I'm going to do more of a standard one this time here, where we're just going back and forth like this, and then you can begin to exaggerate it more and more. So you need to think about how your arm is going to be swinging. Your arm could just swing back and forth like this, or you could bring it up and across the body here where it even touches the shoulder and then snaps back out again, so you've got this type of an action, but it would have to be equal on both sides, so that eventually when we put in the double arm swing, you'd have something like this. So if you're going to go with just a normal arm swing that's like this, you would have the other arm doing basically the same thing. Okay? So it has to be symmetrical, and that's what we'll get into next week when we do the double arm swing. We'll simply mirror what we're doing on the opposite side. So for now, we're just going to be thinking about what we're doing with the one arm. So in this arm swing, you need to start to think, how am I going to make this arm move? What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to make it mechanical. So what I don't want to see is locking your arm into a position like this and just going like this, where it's always the exact same shape all the way through, so all you're doing is tracing it back. I do want to see some overlapping action. So if you want to, you could take the arm and open it like this to the point where it's fully open, and then drag it like this and have your hand dragging in behind, and then bring it and snap it over. Or you can reverse the elbow so it's actually leading in this direction here, pulling and doing something like that. Okay? Or you can snap the elbow so it's actually going backwards and hyperextending. Right? But it's totally up to you. So you can even take it so far as to the point where I mentioned before, you can have an arm swing that's like this. You can have an arm swing that's like this. You can have an arm swing that's like this. You can have an arm swing that's doing something like that if you want to. Okay, totally up to you. Okay, I don't care what you do, just so long as it's 16 drawings and it's cycles. All right? We'll talk a little bit about the timing on it as well, because you can create a snapping action if you want. You don't have to have everything even all the way through. You can vary your timing on it. And so we'll discuss that when we're into our drawings. All right, so that's basically what we're going to do today. So we're going to start off with the clavicle point, swinging the shoulder back and forth, okay, and then we'll add on to the elbow, get that part swinging back and forth, and then we add on the forearm and the hands, the overlapping action. All right, now because this assignment is, it's not a symmetrical assignment, so it's not something that we can flip over and trace off on the opposite side. We don't need to find a center point the way we have done with our previous assignments. You don't need to fold it and find the center. All we need to do is we just need to find a center point. You can pick it anywhere you want. And this is going to represent the center of our clavicle, right in the middle of your chest. So then what I want you to do is just draw a line across here. And this line is going to represent the clavicle. And then we're going to put a ball, just a small ball, on the end here, and that's going to represent the shoulder point. Now, for the sake of the overall drawing, I'm going to draw this out so you can see overall what the size is, sort of like a proportional character design type thing. But we're going to be drawing a bicep part of the arm up here like this, then elbow point, again another circle the same size as your shoulder. Then we're going to have the forearm, which should be approximately the same length as your bicep, right there, down to a point here, and then we're going to add on a box, just a little box like this size here, like a deck of cards, and then another onto the end of it like this to represent the fingers. Right? So that'll be our character for this piece of animation. Very, very simple. So just go back here and all right, so this drawing is going to be drawing number 1. And it's going to represent the extreme back position of the shoulder in our overall action. So we're going to be swinging from this clavicle center point here. We're going to swing the shoulder forward and back towards us. And so this will be the extreme back position. And so we need a forward position on this. So we're going to choose our clavicle point here. And we're going to bring the shoulder forward to about here. So we're not going to take it beyond the center of the clavicle because we don't want to rotate our character around too far. Pretend that this line from this point here, the center of the clavicle, to the shoulder represents a plane. And when this point rotates here on this point, we want to bring it across this way, but not to the point where it goes opposite, beyond. All right, if you start getting that far beyond, then you're actually torquing the body just a little bit too far. It would require you to really twist the upper torso a little bit much. I mean, you could do it if you wanted to, but it's a little extreme. So we're just going to keep it so that we can still see part of the clavicle here. And it's as though the clavicle is coming towards us on an angle like this, and in the previous one it's just being presented back like this. So we're just getting this forward and back action like this. So this is going to be our next extreme position, which is drawing number 9. Now, timing chart wise, we're going to have a timing chart over on the side here from 1 to 9. We're going to have a halfway position, which is again our standard blocking for our timing charts. We're going to place a halfway position here, and then we're going to slow in and slow out on both sides. So we're going to put halves or quarters in here. So now we have an evenly spaced series of in-betweens. So in order to put a slow in to the action, we're going to put a drawing over here, and a slow out would be a drawing over here. So our total number of drawings now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're missing 7 and 8. So we need to put in 2 more. We're going to put another one in here and another one over here. So if we had put another drawing over here and one over here, that would have made it all evenly spaced. It would become mechanical. So we want to slow in and slow out on both sides. So that now gives us number 2, 3, 4, 5 is our breakdown drawing, the halfway position, 6, 7, 8 into 9. And then from 9 back to 1, we're essentially using the exact same timing once again. So we're going to loop back into number 1 again, put our quarters in, eighths slowing in, and 16ths for the final slow in. So this will be 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 is our opposing coming back, 14, 15, and 16. So that gives us our overall 16 drawing cycle from one side to the other. So what we want to do now is we want to in between this. So as I mentioned before, you can have a path of action that is basically just a straight line going between these two. Now here's the only difference between any piece of animation that you're ever going to do is it's how you choose to do your in-between drawing, how you choose your path of action to move from and to your different key positions. So the options that we have are either a straight line. You can go from one point to another with a straight line like this. You can do a C-curve where we loop it down like this, or we could loop it up. So the clavicle goes up and over and then back and around this way, or we could go up and over this way and back this way on the same C-curve, right? Just back and forth like this. Or we could go down like this, swinging up, down, either side. You can choose to alter the curve so it doesn't have to be an equal curve on either side. You could have it go up like this and then come down hard like this. So that your high point is further back. So this is now where your halfway position is not necessarily physically half the distance. You're deciding where you're going to slow in and slow out from by bunching up the drawings on either side, but you can choose to alter that physical halfway position to an off-center position. So rather than it being like this on our ball bounce, where it went directly in the center and we had our quarters and then eighths and sixteenths, like this, we can choose to do something like this, where our high point is now over here, and we choose to bunch up our drawings like this. But that's also not to say that we can't have a high point that goes up like this and comes down to this point down here like this, and still choose a physical halfway position in here. And then we split it into quarters, which actually makes this the change in direction point here, but this is physically the halfway point. And then we put our slow ins and slow outs on either side there. You can still do stuff like that, right? The only difference here is what you choose to do. Okay, it'll alter the timing slightly, like the spacing, because the distance is also related to the speed. Okay, the bigger your distance is and the smaller amount of time, the less number of drawings you have, the faster something is going to go. So if you look at the difference between this one and this one here, notice the physical difference in the space between here and here and here and here. This one is bigger, which means that this portion right here is going to go faster than it would on this one here. Okay? It's not a huge difference because in the overall scheme of things, the distance that you're traveling from and to is exactly the same, but the distance that you choose to make your in-betweens go in will alter the timing on it slightly, but not a huge amount. We could also choose to have a figure eight where our path of action goes like this. So we start off here and we end up over here. Okay, our halfway position would be here, but we'd also have points here and here which change direction. So now this is where we get into the idea of secondary keys. We have our primary keys, which is where we start and we end. If we go in a straight line, then that's pretty simple. Okay? All we have to do is find the halfway point. But if we choose to take a path of action that deviates off of this and does something like this, we then have another 2 points here where we have a change in direction. So in this one here, it's going up and over, and then it changes direction and comes down and over, and then it changes direction and goes up and over. So these 2 points here now become secondary keys. Okay? We got a primary key here and here, and these become secondary keys, also known as breakdowns. Okay, so the term breakdown means that it's a special position that describes something that is out of the norm. Right? So if we have an action that goes from here to here, and we have a halfway in between there, we can call that a breakdown, and we put a little line underneath the drawing. But there's nothing special about that. Right? It's just a halfway position. But as soon as we alter the path of action to a slightly different point within this, meaning that it's going up this way and then coming back down, we're changing direction, this then becomes a formal breakdown that is special within this overall action. Right? So we have to be aware of what we're going to be doing. But again, this is just an issue of you just making a decision. How do you want this to move? Do you want it to just go from here and do this, which is boring? Or do you want it to do this, which is somewhat more interesting and more realistic? Or do you want it to do this, okay, which is a little bit more eccentric? Or do you want it to do this? Or do you want it to do this? Forming a figure 8. Okay? It's just me choosing, as I'm doing with my hand, I'm just choosing. That's the path of action. That's the way I want my arm to move. Okay? So that's all you have to do, is just make a decision. What do you want to do?